think this comes down to the game theory, which is you have a tiny number of people, some of whom are shameless, who are using shame as a weapon, and they are arguing. They've been set up by a political narrative in which one side is understood to be evil, literally evil, and the other side is understood to be the force that holds back evil. And so therefore anything that maps onto the side that is evil is not deserving of protection.
Yes.
This is exactly the dynamic that unfolds when one population goes to war against another. It dehumanizes them. And so Andy No falls outside the zone of protection of the authority. And this is frightening. And I fear that the comparison you're saying, and you've seen these things, but you haven't seen them in a first world city. I think many of us who are paying attention fear that we are going to square that circle by ending up effectively a third world country.
Yeah.
And
this seems to me, has always seemed to me, the dichotomy that exists in politics, and it's why there's a roughly 49-51 situation, or in my country a 48-52 divide that exists, and that there's nothing that wrong with it. In fact, it's a perfectly fine contest, unless, as you say, one side completely disappears. And, I wouldn't want to live in a society where all of the restraining impulses that can exist on the right existed, because, among other things, it would mean your society was closed to new proposals that may well necessarily correct things you should have corrected before and haven't got around to. So I wouldn't want to live in a society where only the right existed. And I wouldn't want to live in a society where only the left existed, where the restraining impulse didn't exist. And that seems to be one of the things that you have here. And it ends in this urine-stenched, historyless, pathetic people wasteland.
I think we are getting to the heart of the matter, right? So I will take a certain amount of flack for having a congenial conversation with you, because you being a conservative are taken to be some sort of a stain on my liberalism.
By the way, may I make a quick interjection there on this?
Please.
I hope people notice that it never happens the other way around.
So interesting. It used to in the U.S.
Right.
It has not in some time.
Yes. When did you think it did last?
80s.
Right, okay. I make the reference because I think that people should deduce a number of things from this. If somebody said to me, Douglas, I can't believe you sat down with Bret. I mean, he is a leftist.
Nobody'd say it.
I wouldn't say, oh my God, I had no idea he was a leftist. I'm so sorry. I mean, I had no idea he had all these views, and he votes for candidates I might not vote for, and I'm so sorry. And if they said, Douglas, you are going to be excommunicated from the right, I would say, who the hell are you? Right. It's such an unfathomable thing to me. The only explanation I've ever had for why this happens the other way around is that the right has stopped being a club of affiliation and the left is a lifestyle choice. I mean, everything I'm not saying in your case, but in leftists, many leftists find everything to do with their identity is tied up with their left-wing views and left-wing activism. And therefore, being excommunicated from the club actually does matter. I can see, my leftist friends who do get excommunicated, and a lot of them do, feel it very deeply because they think, I've spent my life on the left. How could I not be wanted by my tribe? I personally, as I say, there's not a tribe I would want to be a part of that pulled that move.
Absolutely agree with you. And there is, there's some tiny group of us on the left who are neither fish nor fowl at this point, because the fact that we are left in our belief structure does not mean that we are left with respect to who will speak to us, right? So it's become this very bizarre paradox.
Yeah.
But I will say, just in passing, I find nothing odd at all about being a very liberal person who has no trouble talking to you. I find what you say is sensible, interesting, frequently raises points that I need to think about. In fact, I think this is almost the expectation, right? It's not a paradox. In fact, there are no paradoxes.
Yeah.
I've said, all true stories must reconcile. the resolution that makes it not a paradox is all systems that work based on dynamic tension, all complex systems, including the body. The body is absolutely riddled with these things that manage your temperature, your pH, every single system, even, the motion of a limb is tension between two systems that pull in opposite directions. So to the extent that I see the possibility and, in fact, the necessity of fixing the problems with society and making it better, I know that the tension on the other side is what makes that plausible, right? So, I think the problem is we're confused over the center, right? Centrism has a very nasty connotation, and I admit to feeling this personally. I don't like centrists, right? Because they're tepid. But I do think we need to meet in the center, and that two people who are, in effect what I'm saying is, I think you are a kind of specialist, that you see the aspect of the system that requires a conservative bent to see it well, and you see it with a great deal of precision, right? By virtue of that, you may have, just as eyes that are tuned today aren't so great at night, right? That specialty may make it harder for you to see things of the opposite type.
Yeah, sure.
And therefore, there's obviously value to be had in that discussion. And that discussion takes place in the center.
Yes.
Not necessarily with centrists.
An obvious example is things to do with compassion. Yes, this is a misunderstanding that Immanuel Kant describes the famous dove analogy. Kant's dove is the dove flying in free air may make the mistake of thinking that the air under its wings is the thing that's holding it back.
Yeah, that's it.
And may imagine that in free air it could fly further, faster.
Yeah, right, in a vacuum.
Yeah. And that's what these activists and a significant portion of the American public now make the mistake of thinking. They think, and we have this in my own country as well, although thankfully at the ballot box it keeps being seen off. But there are significant numbers of people in our societies who think, if I could only stop capitalism, not a form of capitalism or some extreme versions of capitalism, or capitalism gone wrong, or bad capitalism, or anything more, but capitalism, the exchange of services, financial incentive, products, all this. If I could just stop that, we would be fairer. And it's incumbent upon anybody who knows history, as well as anyone with eyes, to say, the situation you are dreaming of that you think will allow you to fly further and faster will make you plummet.
Yeah.
Plummet. And the people with the most capital from the capitalist system, will be able to leave your benighted results.
Right.
But most people will not.
It will collapse on all of those who don't have the means to leave. Yeah.
This is obviously the case.
As we get there, the conservative force that prevents us from having utopian ideas beyond a functional liberal society that is very fair, right? That force has to prevent us from seeking some place that doesn't exist beyond that state.
We have become wildly intolerant of and unsympathetic with anybody perceived to have privilege, and wildly oversympathetic with anybody who can be claimed to be in any way an oppressed group, even if they are allegedly oppressed because there's something they haven't been doing, which they should have done. That was the deal.
Right. Well, so in this case, I cannot escape the question. We always, when I was growing up, talked about people who had been living in Eastern Europe, Jews who didn't react fast enough and told themselves that it would be okay and, that it would pass, and then it didn't. And, I don't know how to convey to people who are busy attacking the foundations of logic, of mathematics, science, the Enlightenment, the idea of equality amongst the races. I don't know how to say to these people, you are scaring the shit out of those of us who know anything about history, because you sound an awful lot like things that we have seen, and this doesn't end well.
No,
right?
Absolutely.
But I also, the question I asked you earlier, where are the examples where people who were headed this direction turned around because they realized what they were up to, or some properly moderate restraining force caused them to?
The ordinary thing that happens at this stage in a society is a war, in which very large numbers of people die, and people are reminded of one of the forces of nature. Saying that sounds catastrophic, but there's no way around it. That's what late empires and societies which have this number of things. That's what happens, and it requires that as and the problem about that is, of course, is that it's both the mechanism that sets things back on some other trajectory, and also the thing that kills vast numbers of people. You can't ever wish for it. Nobody sane would. Occasionally you meet insane people who would. This is why the misunderstanding, what I described at the beginning, the wrong projection on the wall of things, which you then war against, is so important to correct. And it has to be done at that micro level. And maybe a lot of people didn't realize. I mean, you realized, Heather realized, but that if you allow people to get away with the subtle, tiny misrepresentations around the margins of the thing that is being created, if you allow that to happen, when it's projected on the national wall, you'll know that you should have got it right earlier.
This is exactly how it works. There are those of us who are sticklers for getting the fine detail right. And I think we often look absurd to others because their point is just generally.
Yeah, why didn't you just let it go?
Right.
Absolutely.
And the answer is because sooner or later you're going to hit an amplifier. And when you amplify the little incorrect aspects of this, you're going to cause the whole thing to topple.
I've had this throughout my life and noticed it among many friends and colleagues, and that in different sectors, this is perhaps unknowingly often the reason why we are sticklers for detail.